Have you ever wondered why Africa, a continent bursting with natural resources, is still considered the world's poorest? The story we're often told involves things like corruption, conflict, and maybe a vague mention of history. But those are just symptoms. The real reasons are much deeper, more complex, and honestly, more shocking. It's a story that starts centuries ago, but its effects are still felt every single day. Let's peel back the layers and uncover the truth. The first major blow was the transatlantic slave trade. For over 400 years, the most able-bodied people, the strongest and the brightest, were forcibly taken from their communities. We're talking about an estimated 12.5 million people. Imagine the impact of losing generations of farmers, builders, leaders, and innovators. Societies were shattered, trust was broken, and development wasn't just halted, it was thrown into reverse. This wasn't just a loss of people, it was a loss of potential, a demographic catastrophe that left deep, lasting scars. Then came the scramble for Africa in the late 19th century. European powers gathered in Berlin, and with a map and a ruler, they carved up the continent among themselves. They drew straight lines that paid no attention to the thousands of diverse cultures, languages, and existing political systems. Communities that had coexisted for centuries were split apart, while rival groups were forced together into newly invented countries. This artificial creation of borders is a direct cause of many of the ethnic conflicts and political instability we see today. These weren't nations built by Africans for Africans. They were administrative zones designed for European profit. So, what was the point of colonization? In one word, extraction. The colonial powers weren't there to build nations. They were there to take resources. They established economies that were entirely designed to serve the mother country. Africa's vast wealth of rubber, diamonds, gold, cocoa, and countless other resources were shipped to Europe to fuel its industrial revolution. The infrastructure they built, like railways, wasn't created to connect African people or markets. It was built to lead from the mines and plantations directly to the ports, to make extraction as efficient as possible. Africans were forced into labor, often under brutal conditions, and were prevented from developing their own industries. The system was rigged from the start. In the mid-20th century, African nations began gaining their independence. It was a time of great hope and celebration. But what did they inherit? They inherited those artificial borders, economies designed for foreign benefit, and a severe lack of educated professionals because the colonial system had deliberately neglected to educate the local population. They were handed the keys to a car with no engine and 4 flat tires, and then were criticized for not winning the race. The leaders who tried to break free from this model and build self-sufficient economies were often met with fierce opposition. Figures like Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, who wanted to use his country's resources for his own people, were overthrown or assassinated in Cold War power plays. The message was clear: stay in line. This brings us to the modern era, where the extraction continues, just in a different form. It's called neocolonialism. Today, instead of colonial governors, we have international debt, unfair trade deals, and multinational corporations. African countries are often forced to take loans from institutions like the IMF and World Bank. These loans come with strict conditions, known as structural adjustment programs, that force governments to cut spending on crucial services like healthcare and education and to privatize state-owned assets, which are then often bought by foreign companies. It's a debt trap. A country takes a loan to build a hospital, but the interest payments become so crippling that they have to cut the hospital's funding just to keep up. Let's talk about trade. Africa has 30% of the world's mineral reserves, but it barely sees a fraction of the profits. Foreign companies come in, extract the raw materials, and pay minimal taxes. The processing, the manufacturing, the part that creates real jobs and wealth, happens elsewhere. For example, a country might export raw cocoa beans for a low price, only to import finished chocolate bars at a huge markup. The same goes for oil, diamonds, and coltan, the mineral in your smartphone. The international trade system is structured in a way that keeps African nations as suppliers of cheap raw materials, preventing them from moving up the value chain and building robust, diversified economies. This is not a free market. It's a system that favors the powerful. And what about foreign aid? It sounds good, but it's often a drop in the ocean compared to what's being taken out. Studies have shown that for every dollar of aid that goes into Africa, several dollars are taken out through things like debt repayments, tax avoidance by multinational corporations, and other forms of capital flight. So who is really aiding whom? It often seems like Africa is the one aiding the rest of the world. Aid can also be a tool for political leverage, and it can sometimes undermine local industries and create a culture of dependency, rather than empowering people to build for themselves. Despite all of this, to say Africa is just a place of poverty and despair is to miss the real story. The continent is home to some of the world's fastest-growing economies. Innovation is everywhere, from mobile banking in Kenya to a booming film industry in Nigeria. The resilience, creativity, and ambition of its people are incredible. Young entrepreneurs are building businesses against all odds. Artists are shaping global culture, and activists are fighting for a better future. The potential is immense. But imagine how much more could be achieved if the playing field were level. So, the next time you hear about poverty in Africa, remember the full picture. It's not about a lack of resources or a failure of its people. It's the result of a long, painful history of exploitation that continues to this day in more subtle forms. From slavery to colonialism to the unfair economic systems of today, the continent has been systematically held back. True progress requires addressing these root causes. It means debt cancellation, fair trade agreements, and cracking down on the tax avoidance that drains billions from the continent. It means giving African nations the freedom to determine their own futures on their own terms. The story of Africa is not over. A new chapter is being written by its people, and it's a chapter of strength, innovation, and hope. Thank you so much for watching. If this video opened your eyes, please give it a like, share it with others, and subscribe for more deep dives into the topics that shape our world. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.